Well, good afternoon, everyone. First, can you all hear me? If not, we'll provide some hearing assistance devices. Okay, I'm getting a lot of nods and thumbs up, so I think we're good. All right, my name is Pete Cahill, and I'm one of the judges of the District Court, and you have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure that the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. First, thank you for filling out the questionnaire that was mailed to you. We appreciate that. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best assured by continuing to provide full and complete answers to the questions that you'll be asked today. These questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and probably other topics. Now, after the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what is called cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense at any question you may be asked. We must pry, at least to some extent, in order to explore opinions you might hold and to hear about experiences you have had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. Now, the defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. In the normal course of the trial, charges might be added to or subtracted from these charges, but those are the charges as it stands. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. And I'd now like to have the parties introduce themselves to you to see if anybody recognizes anybody in the courtroom. First, on behalf of the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. My name is Steve Swisher, representing the state of Minnesota.
Hello, my name is Christina Marinakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
Hello, my name is Keith Ellison, and I'm with the state.
I'm Joshua Larson. I'm also with the state. Thank you.
And for the defense, Mr. Nelson.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Nelson. This is my client, Derek Chauvin, my assistant, Amy Voss.
Thank you. Anybody recognize anybody who's been introduced or anybody else in the courtroom? Okay. I'd also ask other attorneys might be here today or other days during the trial. And so I would ask if anyone knows Matthew Frank, Aaron Eldridge, Jerry Blackwell, or anyone else who works for the Office of the Minnesota Attorney General. All right, I've seen a lot of head shakes. No? No. Raise your hand if the answer is yes. Does anyone know or acquainted with anybody from Mr. Nelson's firm? Okay, no hands. And you have been given a copy of a list of potential witnesses. Please review it if you have not done so already. Before you are questioned individually, you'll be asked if you recognize anybody who is on that list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do during jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in every criminal case so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and attorneys' questions. So I'll instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial, unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. Now, if you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given a witness's testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect, but in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, relationship to the parties, ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity, or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. Now, there are certain things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out to do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers, the witnesses, or even spectators. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, or witnesses do not speak to you. They know that it would be improper to contact you except through the normal jury selection process, and normally they will confine themselves to a brief greeting. During the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. And since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access such social media tools, but please do not publish any information about the case or your thoughts about the case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case. And above all, do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Now, because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number. We aren't being disrespectful, it's just to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast, unless we need to discuss something deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, or would tend to identify you too clearly. In that case, I will specifically order that the audio not be broadcast outside this courtroom. In that case, you will still have to answer questions that will be on the record, but without that audio or video broadcast. Now, with the exception of juror number 39, we'll have you wait in another courtroom until it is your turn to be questioned, and you'll go with a deputy to be escorted back there. Just a reminder, whether you're in that courtroom or this courtroom, we are using COVID prevention measures, so feel free to use all the wipes that are available around all the various courtrooms, and also please wear a mask and follow social distancing guidelines. I've taken my mask off to be more clear during these instructions since I am a good distance away from you, but when we start individual selection, I will take my mask, or my mask will be back on. So with that, juror number 39, you may remain, and the remaining jurors, please go with the deputy. All right, juror 39, if you could come up here. And if you could have a seat right next to me. All right, just for the record, I have my mask back on. We have plexiglass between us, which is sufficient in and of itself. So if you would like to remove your mask, you should feel free to do so.
Okay.
If you're more comfortable with it on, obviously keep it on.
Okay.
In either case, we're going to ask you to pull close to the microphone so that you can be heard pretty well. Okay?
Okay.
Now, before I turn it over to the attorneys, I have a couple things to go over with you. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do. I will.
All right, thank you. First of all, you filled out a questionnaire, and thank you for taking the time to do that. It's very helpful for the attorneys and myself. Is everything that you put on that questionnaire true?
Yes.
Now, it's real common, since that was months ago,
Yes.
that in reflection you might think there's things you need to add or even change because you realize, oh, I should have put that in the questionnaire. So feel free to volunteer that when it comes up.
Okay.
You don't get in trouble because we realize even some of the opinions you might have put in there may have evolved over time.
Right.
So it's not a problem if it's different. The only thing we ask for is your honest opinion.
Okay.
As you sit here right now, are there any major changes you can think of?
No.
Okay. The attorneys will be going through specific questions, and I'm sure you didn't keep a copy of your questionnaire,
Right.
so they might read the answers to you to kind of refresh your memory.
Yeah.
And then if you have a different answer, then feel free.
Okay.
The questionnaire did advise you not to read any articles and to avoid the media about this case. But again, we recognize that was months ago, and I'm sure you did your best efforts to avoid that.
Yes.
Sometimes inadvertently you might see a headline, or you might be talking to a friend and they start talking about it.
Right.
And since we told you don't tell anybody you're going to be a potential juror, you can't really stop them.
Yeah, that's right.
So it kind of puts you in a tough spot. Did anything like that happen such that you learned some more information about this case between now and as you sit here, or between the questionnaire and as you sit here right now?
The only thing I can think of is yesterday my wife told me she knew how many jurors had been selected.
Okay. I don't think that's really going to prejudice you here, so.
Okay.
Um,
And she didn't tell me.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that you remember, either pretrial matters about the parties or anything like
No.
that? Okay.
No.
All right. You were given that long list of witnesses. Did you recognize anybody on it?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Now, as I mentioned, you put in the questionnaire what you knew about the case, and I think just about everybody knew something, some more than others.
Of course.
And there are various opinions that you've given based on what you know. The point of all that was so that the lawyers kind of knew the baseline to work from, but also as a reminder that perfectly fine that you heard things, perfectly fine that you have formed opinions about the case or the people involved.
Yes.
The question becomes, can you put all that aside, put aside what you know, what you've heard outside the courtroom, put aside the opinions you might have formed, and decide this case just on the evidence and the law that I give you?
Yes, I believe I can.
Okay. Do you think you could be fair and impartial?
Yes, I do.
All right. Now, the length of trial we estimate is about 4 weeks, starting March 29th. For example, if you're picked on this jury, you'd be released to be out and about, do what you want, work if you want, not work.
Right.
But we would expect you back on March 29th, and then the next 4 weeks would be consumed with the trial. Can you make that work?
Absolutely, yes.
All right, great. Any questions for me before I turn it over to the lawyers?
None.
All right, thank you. Regarding juror number 39, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your time here today and for coming in and your patience as we work through all of this. So I'm going to ask you a series of just kind of general questions to get to know you a little bit better, and then I'm going to circle back and talk about your questionnaire.
Okay.
I understand it's been quite some time since you've written these responses.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you don't remember every single thing you wrote.
No, I don't.
All right. So as I go through them, I may read some parts to you.
Please do.
All right. And I'm not trying to trick you or
No,
anything.
I realize.
We're certainly trying to just see if you're the right person for this jury.
Yes.
Okay. So if I were to meet you in some social situation, a party, an event, and we engaged in conversation, I walk away from that conversation, what are a couple things about yourself that you would want to communicate to me, you'd want me to know about you?
I guess that I am an open person, open to different opinions.
Okay.
Not in any way aggressive person.
Okay.
I guess.
All right. Do you have any special interests, hobbies, things like that you do?
Music is my biggest hobby.
Okay. You're a musician yourself?
Yeah, I was in my past life, yes.
Okay. But still in the collection and things of that nature, right? As I recall?
I'm pretty much just a listener of music right now.
Okay. So at some point you received a summons to jury duty. It would have been a page or two long, telling you that you were a juror. When you got that notice, what was your first reaction to that notice?
I believe I shouted at my wife. Come here.
Okay.
That's what
All right.
Yeah.
And then was that because you were upset or angry or because you couldn't believe it?
I couldn't believe it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I couldn't believe it.
Did you get the questionnaire with that same notice?
No, not that I recall. I think that came later.
Okay. And then how about when you got the questionnaire and it said that you were going to be a potential juror in this particular case?
Oh, maybe I'm becoming confused because
Okay.
it's when I learned that it was this case
Gotcha.
that I yelled
Gotcha.
at my wife to come. So could you repeat the question?
Sure. I think you've answered it.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
I was trying to gauge your reaction to learning that you were going to be a juror in this case.
Yes.
That's what it was. That's when you yelled at your wife. Or yelled for her.
For her to come to.
Yeah, not at her.
I wasn't yelling at her, no.
Right. Okay. When you learned that you were a potential juror in this case, did it cause you any concern for your personal safety?
It caused my wife concern?
Okay.
No, I don't think it did cause concern.
For you?
I felt a real heavy sense of responsibility.
Okay.
It wasn't really a sense of danger, but just the responsibility of it was heavy.
Sure. But your wife did have some concern?
Yes. Yes.
Where do you think that concern, why do you think she was concerned?
I think she thought I might become a target of something.
Okay. Like from in the context of harassment or physical violence?
I didn't really ask her specifically what she was afraid of, but she was definitely afraid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys have like conversations about it?
I tried not to,
Okay.
as much as I could.
Right. Was that because you were instructed not to talk about it, or because?
Right. Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, it's your wife, right?
It's my wife. Yes.
And fair to say you had I mean, you're not in trouble if you talk to your wife about your concerns or any concerns she might have.
That's right. I had the first line of that letter said, "Don't tell anyone what's in this letter," she probably wouldn't have known.
Okay.
But the problem was that sentence was later in the letter, as I recall. And by the time I'd gotten there, I'd already told her.
Gotcha. So it seems to me that there are things you hide from your wife.
Well, I don't know about that.
All right. So how about when you came down to court? Today's your first day here, right?
Yes.
And you saw the current status of the government center.
Yes.
What was your reaction to that? Like, what did you think?
I thought it was perfectly reasonable and it was the right decision.
Did it help you to feel more comfortable so that you could reassure your wife about your safety during this process?
It's what I expected. It was a little more than I expected, but it didn't change my mind about anything.
Okay. How about when the judge just kind of told you about anonymity and how we're trying to protect your anonymity? Does that help?
Yes, I think that would be yes, it does help.
Okay. And in terms of, at some point in the future, it's very possible that your name would be released publicly.
I totally understand that, yeah.
Okay. And are you comfortable with that?
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
All right. So in your personal or professional life, can you think of a time where you have been called upon to resolve a dispute or a conflict between two people?
Let's see. I have never been a supervisor at work,
Okay.
so
Well, how about like two friends? They get in an argument and they're like, hey, juror number 39, come over here and help us get to the bottom of this.
last year I was involved in the Hennepin emergency response, and I worked in a situation where homeless people were in hotels, and different times the guests at the hotel would there would be a confrontation
Okay.
with
So
the staff.
with staff.
Yeah.
Okay. So in that context, and that I think that's an insightful response. In that context, what tools or efforts would you do to resolve that would you utilize to resolve that conflict?
I would try to bear the brunt of the person's anger and remove the staff member, put myself between that person and the staff member.
So these were more physical confrontations?
Not physical, no.
Okay.
No.
But like verbal?
Verbal, yeah.
Okay. So you would kind of just put yourself in the middle and...
I would try to, I try to take responsibility.
Okay. In your personal life, have you ever, or can you think of a situation where you have had to take two sides of a story and decide which person is telling the truth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what tools do you bring to that analysis? How do you decide, is this person telling the truth versus this person?
I try not to take sides. I try to get to know both people, and sometimes I'll never know who's right.
So that's an interesting statement. Are you comfortable with not ever knowing who's right? With that?
Sometimes I have to be.
Okay.
In the situation I'm thinking of, I just have to be.
Okay. Now, in terms of, again, you're trying to resolve this dispute, right? Or excuse me, trying to determine who's telling you the truth. You said you talked to both sides, listen to both sides of the
Yes.
story, get to know the individuals, get basically the facts of what happened, right? What each person is saying happened.
Yes.
Would there be other things that you could use or that you would consider as important in helping you to decide who is telling the truth?
I would say in that situation, if one person is withholding information from me, then I'm less likely to believe their story.
So when you say withholding information, would you view value or gathering other information an important part of that process? Perhaps if I were to use the word evidence?
Yes. In the case I'm thinking of, that these things happened 30, 40 years ago, so
Yeah.
there isn't really that much evidence to go on
Sure.
in these situations.
Okay. But would you view that as if there's evidence supporting one?
Oh, I have asked for evidence. Yeah. If there was evidence, that would be important.
Okay. Would you consider talking to other people who may have been there or witnessed it themselves, whatever this situation is?
Because this happened when I was a child, I really don't know those people anymore.
Okay, all right. I guess just in general, if you were a juror member, it's getting to be a long day. If you were a jury member here in this case, right?
Mhm.
Evidence will be introduced into this trial,
Yes.
right? And you may take one piece of evidence and assign it a particular meaning,
Yes.
and that meaning may be very important to your analysis of this case, right?
Yes.
But one of your fellow jurors may look at that same piece of evidence in a completely different way than you
Okay.
did, right? And ascribe it a completely different meaning.
Okay.
It's a hypothetical,
Yes.
right? So how could you envision resolving that conflict? You think some piece of evidence is really important, but somebody else doesn't.
The same piece of evidence.
Exact same.
We're
piece
looking
of-
at the same thing and seeing two completely different things.
Right.
At some point, I just have to respect his or her viewpoint.
Would you automatically give up your viewpoint and just, in order to build consensus, would you just abandon your belief it was important?
No.
Okay. Because ultimately you understand that any jury decision has to be unanimous. You understand that?
Yes, I do understand that.
And that, the concern or the question that we ultimately have for jurors is, are you going to participate in the process, right? And are you just simply going to agree for purposes of agreement, or are you willing to stick by your guns?
No, absolutely the latter.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. But would you be willing to re-examine your analysis of that hypothetical piece of evidence in order to try to see the perspective of the other juror?
Yeah, I don't think there's a question about that.
Okay.
You have no choice, right?
Right.
Right. So,
Can you think of a situation in your life where you were 100% convinced that you were right, but then suddenly something came up and you realized you were wrong?
Um, hmm. I'm trying to think of something, but
And it's,
blanking out.
yeah, it's okay. I mean, do you think it's possible that you've had that experience in life, maybe without a concrete
I think it's
example?
hard to go through life without having that experience. I'm just having a hard time thinking of one.
Sure. Well, let me just put it in the abstract rather than having a concrete specific example in mind. If you were to be convinced of something, absolutely, and it later turned out you were wrong, how do you think you would respond to that?
You know, just popped in my mind was Woody Allen.
Oh,
I used to love Woody Allen.
okay.
Just thought he was perfect. And obviously he's not to me now, so. But it doesn't, that's not even a good example because that doesn't mean his films weren't good. Jeez. Could you repeat the question again?
Sure. I guess I'll just, again, just rather than trying to focus on a specific example,
Okay.
you acknowledge that at some point in your life, you probably had a very firm belief in something and it later was proven wrong. How do you feel about that? Like, you know, when that happens, are you the kind of person that says, oh, well, no big deal? Or are you the person that tries to learn from that mistake and apply it to future decision makings?
I hope I'm the person who could do that.
You strike me as someone who's quite reflective. And I appreciate that, right? I mean, I really appreciate the thoughtful responses that you've given us both in the questionnaire and here today. So, and I'm not, you know, I'm not making light of that. I just want you to know that. So, let me ask you some questions about your questionnaire, if that's okay.
Please do.
Okay. I'll try to, it'll be a little less esoteric and, and more concrete. One question I had is, what is the Hennepin Emergency Response? Is that a volunteer organization or is that?
That was Hennepin County.
I apologize. You're, yep, we're going to move on from there.
Okay.
The first question in the questionnaire asked you to write down what you remembered hearing about in the media about this case.
Yes.
Okay. And you wrote a lengthy paragraph based on some of your recollections or what you had seen in the media. Okay?
Yeah.
This whole thing kind of started with a Facebook video. You're aware of that? I mean, in terms of how it became so publicized?
Yeah, a video. I didn't know it was a Facebook video.
Okay.
Right.
So we'll talk a lot about a video or the video. You're aware that a bystander took a video of the arrest of Mr. Floyd.
Yes.
And the bystander circulated that video through social media. It went viral and hit the news, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is the video, you said that you've watched a video of Mr. Floyd's death on the news or internet 2 to 3 times. That's what you estimated back when you filled this out.
Sounds right.
And what I want to make sure we're talking about the same video.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why I'm asking these questions. was the video you saw, did it appear to come from a bystander to the arrest, or was it more like body-worn cameras of a police officer?
It was a bystander.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you see that video simply in the news, like in short clips, or did you go on the internet and look up, or some social media, and watch a longer version of that video?
No, it was in the news, but I believe I showed that to my wife when she came home. I
Okay.
played the news for her.
Right. And so, I mean, I guess the question is, have you, the parts of the video that you watched, I think we're talking about the same video, but the parts that you watched were 30-second news clips or a minute news clips or less?
Yeah, if that, yeah.
If that, right. And you saw those on the news a couple of times,
Yes.
right? Obviously, this became a major part of the news cycle for some time, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And you would and it sparked conversations, obviously, with you and your wife, but also with your friends and family members
Yeah.
and things of that nature too, right?
Yes.
And you were asked about, a couple of questions about the opinions that you held,
Yes.
what you discussed with your family and friends, and your opinions of Mr. Chauvin as well as Mr. Floyd. Do you recall those questions generally being asked?
Generally, I don't remember about Mr. Floyd, but
Okay. So let me say first that your opinions are your opinions, right? You are entitled to have your opinions,
okay.
okay?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to question your right to have the opinions,
Right.
but ultimately what we need to know is, will those opinions have an impact on your ability to serve as a juror? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. And whether or not you can set aside your opinions and judge this case on the evidence that's presented. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And you can agree to do that, do you think?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you about a couple of your opinions.
Okay.
The question read, from what you have seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant? And it gave you some check the box options of very negative, somewhat negative, neutral, somewhat positive, or very positive, or other.
Uh-huh.
And you check the box very negative.
Yes.
Okay? And they asked to explain why, you wrote, I base my feelings on images of the incident that were filmed by a bystander. What I saw were the people who treated a citizen as an enemy combatant worse than an enemy combatant.
Yes.
Okay. Can you, what do you mean by that?
My reaction when I saw the video was, it reminded me of like a war scene, like an image from a war. What popped into my mind was images of World War II.
Okay. And as a result of what you saw, you formed an opinion that was very negative about Mr. Chauvin.
Yes.
Okay. And then in the conversations that you had with your friends, coworkers, family members, you wrote, I have expressed the opinion that it was an outrageous incident and that the Minneapolis police need to be rethought. That in this instance, the police were behaving more like an occupying force than a police officer.
Yeah, that's what hit me. I would say.
Okay. And so I guess I have a couple follow-up questions on that. Were those thoughts specifically directed towards Mr. Chauvin?
No, I don't know Mr. Chauvin, so.
Okay. I mean, when you say an occupying force and this imagery of war and World War II, right? were you looking at it from the context of there were other officers involved, or were you sort of focused on the actions of Mr. Chauvin?
I was focused on what I perceived to be a lack of respect for life.
Okay. And I appreciate your opinion. You're not the only person who's come into this courtroom and had that same opinion. Okay. It's a very valid opinion. It's your opinion, and you're entitled to it.
Mm-hmm.
The question, though, becomes, right? You have this opinion.
Yes.
It's bad, right?
Yes.
It's so bad that you're comparing it to, or likening it to, images of war,
Yes.
right? And so you had a very interesting answer, I thought, when in the questionnaire, when it talked about the presumption of innocence.
Okay.
And if you let me read your response to that. The questionnaire asked you, under our system of justice, defendants are presumed innocent of the criminal charges against them. Would you have any difficulty applying this principle of law? And here's what you wrote. You wrote, in a case with as much publicity as this case, it is difficult. Based upon the visual evidence I have seen, I haven't presumed the defendant is innocent. But I know I have only seen and read a small fraction of what occurred. Knowing this, I believe I can presume innocent until all the facts are presented to the jury. Okay?
Yes.
So it strikes me in your reflection on this case that you have some struggle with that concept of law, or applying that principle of law in this case, based on the opinions that you had previously formed.
I think what I'm trying to say was a video is not really much evidence.
Okay.
I mean, it's powerful. Visuals are powerful things, but it's just the tip of the iceberg
Okay.
of what people involved, or what everyone, what you know, what I think that's what I was trying to say. That
Well, I mean,
just if I had to judge on just that small piece of evidence, it would be hard for me to say not guilty.
Right.
But I can acknowledge that there's evidence that would prove not guilty.
okay. So as the criminal defendant in our country, Mr. Chauvin has no burden. He does not have to prove any evidence. He does not have to ask a single question of any witness.
That's true, yes.
He does not have to testify.
Yep.
And so you can adhere to those principles of law?
I believe I can.
So there's every juror who's come through has said, I believe I can. But the question is, you have very strong opinions, right? You know, a very negative first impression, so to speak. Can you basically clear your brain of that, a clean slate, and start from the beginning, analyze this case only on the evidence presented in the case, essentially abandoning your opinion?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do.
And, you know, again, I don't know what's in your heart or in your head, right? I have to take you at face value.
That's right.
And you have to do the kind of soul searching I think you've been doing to answer those questions.
Yes.
But is it hard to acknowledge that? I mean, is it hard to for you to say I can do that?
If I couldn't imagine myself saying not guilty, I wouldn't be here.
Okay.
I just wouldn't be here.
Okay. So that is one potential outcome that you could foresee from this case.
Absolutely.
Now, the questionnaire asked some questions about attending like rallies and
Yes.
protests and things like that.
Yes.
And you indicated that your wife had in fact attended a rally
Yes.
and given money to at least one organization that supports policy reform.
Yes.
Again, that you and your wife, I'm assuming, share some similar sentiments about this matter.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah.
The policy reform, was it specifically the money that was donated to this organization? Was it specifically geared at policing reform, or was it other type of policy reform?
No, she predates this case.
Okay.
She's always been doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, but your wife did at least attend one rally after these?
She did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you supportive of her in doing that?
Yeah, I wasn't unsupportive, no.
Right. But you didn't go yourself?
No. No, I'm in a very odd situation where I was working full-time
Okay.
during this time.
Okay.
So
Sure.
it wasn't even a question for me.
If you didn't have to work, would you have attended?
This particular one, I probably would have gone to
Okay.
this one.
Do you know, was it a,
What was it?
was it a anti-police
No.
or defund the police kind of a thing?
No, it was. Oh, gosh, haven't thought of this for a while. I can't say for sure which rally it was. I don't remember.
Okay. But was it about racial justice, or was it about police reform?
No, it had to do with this case somehow.
Okay. So the questionnaire had a series of questions about your personal involvement or interaction with law enforcement, and you've had some through your professional life, right?
Yeah.
And you've also had a bicycle stolen from your house, I think, when you called the police, right?
Yeah.
And actually, you said that you were very satisfied in the police response to the bike theft.
I was more than very satisfied.
They responded right away, found your bike, right?
In 10 minutes, they
Okay.
found my bike. My wife's bike.
Okay. Have you personally ever had any negative interaction with law enforcement?
It's funny, I remembered this today when I was a small boy. My mom was driving home from from her work, and she had a headlight out, and she got pulled over, and I hid in the wheel well, not the wheel well, where your feet go.
Oh.
And I remember the policeman shining a light in on me, and but she didn't get a ticket.
All right.
So it wasn't a scary. I mean, I must have been not even 5 years old or something. I don't know.
Gotcha. So, but other than that, memory that popped into your head today, have you ever had a negative interaction with a member of a police force?
No.
Okay.
No.
There were a series of questions, really statements, that were listed in here, and it was asked you to rank your opinion with that statement from 1 being strongly agree to 5 being strongly disagree? Do you remember that generally?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to ask you a couple of questions about some of those opinions. So 1 states that discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be. And you strongly disagreed with that. Basically saying that, I'll read the statement again.
Yeah, it's confusing, isn't it? Yeah.
Discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be.
Discrimination is not as bad as me. Okay.
And you strongly disagreed with that.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
It's a strange statement. I know some of these things
It's
oddly
double
worded.
negative or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, I think the nature of the question is discrimination is real, but it's not as bad as the media makes it out to be.
And I disagreed.
Right. So you strongly disagreed.
So
So that you think that discrimination is as bad as the media makes it out to be.
yeah, I guess I did. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
That's so confusing.
It's all right. Sometimes we lawyers, we like to make things a little more complicated than they need to
I'm
be.
sorry if you wrote that question.
I didn't, but that's okay.
Okay.
The next question is kind of similar to that. It reads, blacks and minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system. And you somewhat agreed with that.
Yeah, that's more of a maybe. Yeah, I don't know enough to, but I suspect that's true.
Okay. But you have no personal...
No, I can't strongly agree with that.
Okay. You have no...
Because I have no experience. I don't have the experience
Okay.
to tell you that.
I'm trying to take everything now, so let's try not to talk over each other. Possible.
Okay.
The next question was, police in this country treat whites and blacks equally, and you strongly disagreed with that as well.
Huh, okay. I don't know if I'd say strongly today.
Okay. I mean, do you have personal, firsthand knowledge of police treating minorities differently than white people?
I'm a little surprised I said strong. I was that strong about it.
Okay. One of the statements was, I support defunding the Minneapolis Police Department, and you strongly agreed with that.
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
Oh.
And if you do...
I did at the time. Obviously, I did at the time, I guess. Yeah.
Again, that's right. We all have our opinions about politics and music and religion and whatever else. We all have our opinions. Your opinions are your opinions.
Yes.
And that's fine. So, I mean, do you still support the notion, maybe not as strongly now, but do you still support the notion of defunding the Minneapolis Police Department?
I guess my view on it is that, and I think it was then too, but that the police are asked to do too much.
Okay.
Way too much. And that other entities should take that burden off them. It's just, I think, the way things have developed over time.
Okay, fair enough. So, one last question that I think you had. Well, let me ask you a couple other questions. One question reads, because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second-guess decisions they make while on duty. And you strongly disagreed with that.
Yeah. That's kind of a tricky worded question. Could you read it again?
Sure. Because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second guess decisions they make while they're on duty.
No, I stand by that.
Okay. Do you think that there's a difference between a decision that's made over a period of time versus a very rapid, quick decision?
I guess where I'm coming on from on that is that, you know, as government employees don't have any, I mean, every decision is going to be questioned, and that's how it should be.
Okay.
I mean,
So let me ask you the way I asked someone earlier today. about
Okay.
this. Okay. You have a police officer who is stealing drugs or money from the evidence department, right? They're on, while they're on duty. Is it okay to question that decision?
if they're stealing, yes.
Would it be okay if there were evidence to prosecute that police officer for doing that?
Yes, isn't that what? Yeah.
Now, take a different situation. I'm a police officer and I'm chasing someone in the car, right? High-speed chase down the highway. Car crashes. The guy gets out and starts running down the dark alley. I'm chasing after him. And all of a sudden he turns around and he pulls his hand up towards me,
Yeah.
right? And I shoot that person.
Yes.
Right. Is there a different analysis in that situation than the former?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time following how they're similar.
Well, they're decisions that officers make in the line of
Oh,
duty.
the
Should they be
factor
second?
decisions.
Right. And should they be second guessed?
Yeah. Yes, they should be. I mean, I don't know. Second guessed is the wording I'd use.
Okay.
But questioned.
Question?
And I think 999 times out of 1,000, the second thing you said, where someone pulls out or even points their finger at that police officer made the decision they had to make, and that's fine, but it still can be questioned.
Okay. And that's fair enough. Again, I'm not.
You don't have. Yeah, I don't feel you have any expectation of just having no decision made on anything you do.
Okay. Fair enough.
Particularly if you're a government employee.
Okay. What is the distinction between a government employee and a private employee?
There's more responsibility
Okay.
for a government employee.
Okay. One of the statements is, I do not trust the police. And you
Okay.
circled strongly disagree. So you trust the police?
I do. I do.
You were asked a series of questions about both the Black Lives Matter.
Could I go back to that for a second?
Of course.
I do trust the police, but part of the reason I trust the police is because I know they're checks. They're checks to what they do, and I trust those checks. I trust. I have faith in the system.
Okay. And there are some other questions about that I'm going to ask you because.
Okay.
Okay. And I really appreciate that.
Okay.
So you were asked a couple of questions about the Black Lives Matter, whether it's movement or organization or one or the other, as well as Blue Lives Matter, organization and or movement, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And you have a very favorable view of the Black Lives Matter, and you write that it carries on the tradition of civil rights activists of the past and their struggle.
That's my perception. Yeah.
And you continue to hold that belief?
I do. I don't. I'm ashamed to say I don't know enough about it, though.
Okay.
I'm not yeah, I'm not involved in it.
And with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you had a somewhat unfavorable opinion of them, and you wrote, "I don't understand how anyone could view the police, Blue Lives, as somehow threatened or endangered when they are well armed and have all the power in most situations. I'm baffled by it."
Yeah, I'd say suspicious of it. I guess I just, yeah,
Okay.
I just didn't compute for me.
Okay. You have a background in history.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. I think you're.
That might be overstating it.
Oh, you have a degree in history?
Yeah.
Okay. You have a lawyer in your family who actually lives, like you share a duplex or something with her?
Yeah, that's my relative to my wife, yeah.
Okay. She no longer practices law?
No.
Okay. Would you, if you were to serve as a juror in this case, would you knock on the door and ask to talk about the law with her?
I wish I could.
Okay.
I came so close to telling her. I just stopped myself as I read that last sentence or whatever. Yeah. I'd love to talk to her about it, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
Your father was a physician, right?
Yes.
And your wife is a nurse?
Yes.
Okay. So if there were to be medical evidence presented in this case, would you, I don't know, I may put my foot in my mouth, but is your father still alive?
No, he passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry. So with your wife, if there's medical evidence and you're trying to think, I don't understand how this works, would you go home at night and ask her about?
It would be tempting, but I don't think I would, no.
Okay. Can you promise us you won't?
I can promise you that one. Yeah, it would.
So I've got just a few more questions for you, sir, and I really appreciate, again, your time. The last couple of questions I have are on your opinions regarding the justice system generally, and you were asked a question, do you believe that the jury system in this country is fair? Why or why not? And you write, although no system is infallible, when it comes to making a judgment as consequential as denying someone his or her freedom, I believe that being tried before 12 of your peers provides a fairness that wouldn't be there without a jury.
Yeah.
Good answer.
I amazed myself. Yeah.
Explain, like, what's the difference between no jury and a jury? Like, why do you see that as such a benefit?
I have to admit I'm weak on the law. I'm weak on this subject. So, and even since I wrote that, I've learned more about. I don't think I even knew it had to be unanimous when I wrote that. Or I mean, I've kind of picking up things about. So, what's your question again?
I just was wondering, what do you think the benefit of having a jury?
Over just having the judge decide?
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to put down judges. It's just that independence from the government, from just this independent entity,
Right.
that doesn't belong to the police department or to the county. It's an independent. I think that's
Fair enough.
what I'd say.
Okay. So, again, I want to read to you two of your responses again, and then kind of circle back on some stuff. So, again, it asks, the question was, Under our system of justice, defendants are presumed innocent of the criminal charges against them.
Yeah.
Would you have difficulty following this principle of law? And your response again was, in a case with as much publicity as this case, it is
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
Based upon the visual evidence I have seen,
Yeah.
I haven't presumed the defendant
No.
is innocent.
Right.
But I know I have only seen and read a small fraction of what occurred. Knowing this, I believe I can presume innocence until all facts are presented to the jury. Okay? So I want you to think about that. I'm going to read you another one of your responses.
Okay.
The question was, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you said yes.
Yes.
And you said, it asks, why do you feel that way about serving as a juror in this case? And you wrote, I am marking yes because I want to look in the mirror every morning and know the person looking back at me wasn't afraid to do the right thing when called upon.
That's right.
I believe I would make a good juror for many reasons, but I will leave it up to others. And you kind of go on from there. A little. I mean, not much. I can read the rest if you want.
No.
Okay.
Go this way.
So it strikes me, sir, that you have taken your obligation as a potential juror remarkably seriously. I'm telling
Thank
you
you.
that. And I think you've reflected, right? So you've acknowledged that once you saw the bystander video,
Right.
you did not presume Mr. Chauvin innocent, right?
No.
And-
I mean, I was, yeah.
Right? So you didn't presume him innocent. And also you have some very strongly held opinions, which again, it's your right to have those opinions. And I may agree or disagree with some of them.
Yeah.
The point being is that in view of your personal beliefs, right?
Uh-huh.
You've acknowledged that
Yeah.
you didn't presume Mr. Chauvin innocent, and you have concern about doing the right thing when called upon. Are you the right? Can you honestly say to us, I can put all of these things aside. I can follow the law. I can listen to the evidence. I can apply the evidence to the law and make a decision. Can you do that? It free from all of your other opinions.
Yeah. That last question about was the most difficult one. And I've thought about it a lot, and you know, I don't aspire to be on the jury. That was not it's not a goal or dream of mine. But I wanted to, what I want to say, I know this isn't answering your last question, but it's, my willingness to do it shouldn't be a factor in deciding if I'm willing to do, I'm totally willing to, so that's getting that, but that's not the important part. The important part is, do I think I could do it? And I do think I can do it.
Okay. So thinking you can do it and knowing you can do it are two different things.
You're right.
Right?
You're right. You know, that's true.
So if you're sitting here and you're listening to the evidence, right? And you've already had your opinion influenced by what you've seen in the past. Do you think it may affect your opinions about all of these things we've talked about? May harm my client because you're focusing on your opinion about police reform or defunding the police. Will you look at the evidence as a blank slate?
No, I respect that. I respect your. I take this very seriously, and Yeah. I really think the answer is yes, I could. If you do your job well and you show me evidence, I definitely, that thing is when yeah.
But I don't have to show you evidence.
Oh, or not you, whatever. If I see evidence, I'm sorry. But yeah,
Your problem is seeing that video, right? I mean, you formed such a strong opinion based on that video that it is really cascading through the rest of your answers.
I think that anyone who saw that video had a reaction, right?
And I know we all want to be fair, right? We want to say that we're going to be a good juror. But again, I don't,
No, that's right. You don't know.
And we need to be certain of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'll just ask you one last time. Can you?
I can, even though it pains me to say, I can.
Fair enough. If I may have a moment, Your Honor. All right. So, sir, if you were to ultimately find a not guilty verdict, right? How do you think that would affect, well, how do I phrase this? Your wife and you share some views, right? Could you go home after finding a not guilty verdict, and how could you explain that to your wife?
I absolutely could, yeah.
You could?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. No further questions. We'll exercise a peremptory, Your Honor.
Your Honor, let me talk briefly. All right. Juror 39, we're going to excuse you from this case. And so the deputy will collect some of the material from you, and then you'll be released. You have no further jury service on this trip.
Okay, thank you.
And hold off bringing anybody else in. All right, we are outside the presence of the juror. The defense made a peremptory challenge. The state followed with a Batson challenge and stated, and maybe Mr. Schlischer, you can make a record of what your offer was, which I found was not a prima facie showing.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. The state did, as the court indicated, issue a Batson challenge to the defense's peremptory challenge of juror number 39. The articulated basis for the Batson challenge is that the prospective juror identifies as Hispanic. We believe that the prospective juror stated an unequivocal ability to follow the law, follow the court's instructions, presume innocence, and did not express any views that were outside of what other seated jurors have expressed.
All right, I would note, first of all, that you're telling the court the standard for a challenge for cause. This is not a challenge for cause. I don't find that this was race-based. This juror was very torn, you could tell, and he had difficulty coming to ultimately what I think Mr. Nelson was trying to get to was a challenge for cause, that he could not presume innocence. It was difficult for him to get there. It was difficult for him to get beyond the videotape because he likened it, unlike any other potential juror, to a World War II occupation force. His wife has engaged in went with protests. That does not by itself. He did not participate, so that's not a significant factor, but I can see why the close relationship with somebody who is deeply involved and his opinions regarding the defendant as expressed in the questionnaire give the defense a race-neutral reason for their strike, and I don't think the state has made a prima facie case. I would note for the record that we have 6 jurors so far. They identify as follows from the jury records. 1 is multiracial, 3 are white, 1 is Hispanic, and 1 is black. So I see no pattern whatsoever from the defense of striking racial minorities. So I don't think that supports the state's challenge either. So that's Kurt's ruling. We'll bring in the next juror. Thank you. Jury number 40. That's it. Come on up. And you are juror number 40, is that correct?
I am.
All right. A couple things before I turn you over to the attorneys for questioning. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right, thank you. First thing I'm going to do is ask you about the questionnaire. You filled out a questionnaire. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Is there anything as you sit here right now, since it's been several months, that you think you would change or add to, or even some opinions that you might change because perhaps your opinion has evolved over the last few months?
I don't think so, although I was kind of trying to remember the questionnaire and my answers, and so
Okay.
it's been a while.
I'm going to ask you to pull up just a little
Sorry.
bit.
Okay.
And also, we are exercising COVID precautions. I'm going to keep my mask on. We have plexiglass between us, and you also have plexiglass between you and the attorneys. So I do allow in this circumstance, if you would like, to take off your mask, but I leave it to you. Sometimes the mask makes it a little harder to understand people, but I leave it to your discretion as far as keeping it on or off.
Okay.
Any changes or additions to the questionnaire that you're aware of?
Not that I can think of, no.
And again, it's been a long time. The attorneys might point to specific answers you gave, because I assume you didn't keep a copy of your questionnaire.
I did not. Yeah.
So to refresh your memory, they may go to a question and read it over, including your answer. If your answer today is different, don't worry about it. What we want more than anything is your honest, candid answers to the questions.
Okay.
Also, the questionnaire advises you not to read any articles or pay attention to any media. But we realize that in the months since then, inadvertently you may have come across some information. You see a headline, or a friend talks to you about the case, and we told you don't tell anybody you're a juror, so you can't exactly stop them. Anything like that happen to you that added to your knowledge of the case?
No, I would say not that added to my knowledge, no.
Okay, anything about the facts of the case or the participants or pretrial matters that have been litigated, anything like that?
No.
Okay. The whole point of this is there's a variety of things that you know about the case, and you may have formed certain opinions about the case. And we want to make sure that if you sit as a juror, you decide this case only on the evidence and on the law that I give you, and that you put aside anything you know about the case, put aside any opinions about the case, and just take the evidence as it comes. Do you think you could do that?
I do.
Okay. You were given a long list of witnesses. Did you recognize anybody on the list?
There's one name, kind of a common name. So David Elm might have been I think it was a student maybe years ago.
Okay. I'm not sure that person's participation in the case, but if that person appears, how long ago was this person a student?
10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever their occupation is or whatever their role in this case, do you think that would affect your ability to weigh them dispassionately and neutrally?
No, because I really don't. I recognize the name, but I don't really remember the person very much.
Okay, and so you could treat them like any other witness as far as weighing their credibility?
Absolutely.
Okay. We've also had an estimate of the trial length would be, if you were on this jury, we would excuse you and you could go about your business until March 29th, and then come back, we would start trial, we anticipate 4 weeks. And I think you may have indicated some concern with the length of the trial.
So as a teacher, I'm concerned about my students, but I have made arrangements for substitutes as needed. So
Okay, so you could make it work.
yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me before I turn you over to the attorneys?
Not that I can think of.
All right, with that, regarding juror number 40, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
So that microphone unfortunately doesn't pull closer to you, so I think you
Okay.
gotta move in.
All right.
And with your mask on, it's fine to keep it on, but obviously makes it a little bit more difficult to hear. Excuse me. So what I'm going to do, sir, is I'm going to ask you a series of some kind of general questions first,
Okay.
and then from there, I'd like to ask you some specific questions about some answers in your questionnaire. Okay?
Okay.
Now, I know it was a long time ago, and you probably haven't read it. You didn't keep a copy.
Right.
Nobody's trying to trick you. We'll read it to you, refresh your recollection a little, okay?
Okay.
All right. So first question I have is, if you and I were to meet in some social circumstance, whether it be a party or an event of some sort, what are a few things that you would want me to know, or what are a few things I would learn about you in that conversation?
I'm a husband and dad. I'm a teacher. I love singing in my church choir with my wife. A musician.
Okay. Are you a musician in ways other than with your voice? Do you play instruments?
I don't play instruments. I'm a singer and a music teacher.
Okay, perfect. And it's my understanding of the process that at some point you received a letter in the mail that said you were going to be summoned for jury duty. That was the first sort of notification, right?
Yes.
When you received that first notification, what was your first reaction?
Oh my.
Okay. Why?
Well, I mean, I know that it's a case that it's a large magnitude, and it's honestly a little nerve-wracking.
Okay.
But I gave it some thought and recognize that it's my duty to try to serve jury duty as needed.
Okay. And so you had that thought when you learned that it was this particular case, right? Because is that when you learned it was this particular case when you got this big questionnaire in the mail?
I think that's what, yeah, it was a questionnaire, right?
Right. Okay. And how did you feel today when you got here to the government center?
A little nervous. I can stand up and sing in front of a group of people and be comfortable, but talking in front of people and stuff is nerve-wracking.
Sure. Fair enough. I assure you, I don't want to trade roles with you. All right? I don't think you'd appreciate that. But the security and the fortifications, you said that made you kind of nervous, or just being in this room, I guess?
I know the process more, actually the security made me, that felt good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because I know you've expressed some concerns about anonymity and things of that nature in your questionnaire, and so you were concerned about it, and seeing those preparations made you feel safe.
That's correct.
Okay. And then ultimately, this afternoon, when the judge kind of gave us the instructions, or gave you the instructions about how we're doing everything we can to maintain your anonymity at this point, how did that make you feel?
I mean, good. I still have a little bit of concern about, after the trial, if when our names are released.
Okay.
I know sometimes they're not. I don't know how that works, but.
Okay. So at some point they may be, though, too, right?
Right.
We don't know what the future will hold, but at some point they may be. Why does that make you nervous?
I mean, it can potentially draw some unwanted attention. I don't know.
Okay. Are you thinking more in terms of harassment or potential harassment, or are you thinking more in terms of physical safety, like violence that could be visited upon you?
I guess I'm just thinking in terms of people wanting information and that kind of thing.
Okay. So no concerns for your physical safety, just more concerned you just kind of want to be anonymous.
Yeah, I would say my wife has more concerns about physical
Okay.
safeties, but yeah.
So, and perfectly natural, you've talked about this with your wife, right?
Yes.
And you said she has some more concerns about your physical safety.
Yeah.
Do you think that's justified on her part?
I mean, I've tried to convince her that I don't think that that's a probability or an issue. But,
Okay.
yeah.
Have you been successful in your convincing?
I guess that's funny. I was going to say the jury's still out, but
Okay. Well, let me ask you just some kind of other general questions. Can you think of a situation in your life where you have been called upon to resolve a dispute between two people?
sure.
Okay. Now, just thinking about that in your mind, without any real details, how did you approach that situation, and what did you do to try to resolve that dispute?
I'm thinking of some students, and so brought them together and actually first heard kind of each of their stories from their own perspective, and then brought them together and encouraged them to talk it through and work it out.
Okay. In terms of being a juror, right? I mean, this is in some regard part of what your job would be as you analyze the evidence in the case. Disputes may arise, right? In the jury room, a piece of evidence made to one juror seem to be very important and not to another, right?
Sure.
So in that jury room, there may be disputes. And ultimately, that's what this case is about too, right? It's a dispute. There's two different perspectives or two sides of the story. So what tools would you bring as a juror in those two scenarios, both in terms of resolving disputes among jurors as well as analyzing the evidence? And that's a really long, complicated question, and I'm sorry.
I mean, I guess I have a pretty calm demeanor and can try to encourage people to listen to each other and try to explain their points of view to the best extent possible.
Okay. Do you think that there are things in terms of the analysis of the evidence? How would you resolve a dispute over evidence? Right, like if
I guess I haven't thought about it. I'm not sure.
okay. Well, let me try to give you a simple hypothetical. Say that there is some piece of evidence, and we'll just pick a number, a lab report, right? And you're looking at this lab report and you're saying, I think that this is a really important piece of information. But somebody else goes, that's nonsense. We don't need to worry about that, right? How do you, something that's important to you is not important to someone else. How do you resolve that?
Kind of make a list of pros and cons as to why it's valuable and why it seems important.
Okay. And in terms of, you understand that a jury decision in this type of a case has to be unanimous?
Mm-hmm.
That's a yes?
Yes.
And that means all 12 people have to agree,
Right.
right? So if you're looking at this piece of evidence, right, and the majority of the group is saying, ignore it, quit, it's not important, are you the type of person that would just simply kind of follow along with everyone else? Or would you say, no, this is really important and you need to hear me and speak your mind?
Probably the latter.
Okay. You're going to hear my opinion type of a guy?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, can you think of a situation in your personal life where you've had to decide between two stories which person is telling the truth about a story?
I'm not coming up with anything specifically right now.
Sure. You have some grown children, right?
Yes.
And at some point in their adolescence or young adulthood, perhaps your children had two very different stories about something that happened.
Actually, I can't think of any circumstances like
Okay.
that.
All right. Well,
It might be my perspective might have been different than theirs.
Okay. Well, let's just kind of take it in the hypothetical then. How do you tell if someone is telling the truth?
I mean, you listen to what they're saying, you pay attention to how they're saying it. If there's other people that can corroborate, I think that all comes into play.
Okay. So now let's take it in a little broader lens. What if two witnesses are looking at that same story, that same incident, right? That same thing. They're watching it happen. They're standing right next to each other. And one of them says, this is what happened. And the other says, this is what happened, right? And they're nowhere close to each other. How do you reconcile with the same process or?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just have to kind of keep trying to find new ways to express what they're seeing and see if they can come to some sort of understanding that they can both agree upon.
Okay. Can you think of a circumstance in your life, either personally or professionally, where you were 100% convinced of something and it later turned out you were wrong?
I'm sure that's happened.
Okay. Are you the type of person who can reflect back and say, I made a mistake, I'm going to learn from it? Or are you kind of the person that brushes it aside and...
Oh, no, definitely. I've learned a lot from mistakes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions about your responses. And again, I'll read you what you wrote. So no tricks afoot here, okay? The first question that you're asked in the questionnaire is what you remember seeing about this incident in either the media or in conversation, your general knowledge about this particular case, okay? Now, before I go down this path, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. A video, you may describe this video, was taken by a bystander. That video was uploaded to a social media platform, went viral, and became news, right?
Yes,
Have you seen that video?
yes.
Okay. And I think you said you've seen it 6 or more times.
I'm guessing that's about right, yeah.
Okay. And I guess my question is in that 6 or more times, when you learned of this video, did you go onto a social media platform or some other website and watch the video from start to finish, or are you referring to smaller clips and segments?
I mean, the first few times, I think it was just the smaller clips, and then there was one time where I saw a longer segment.
Okay. Like, have you seen any other videos of this incident that have been made publicly available?
I feel like there was one that was like from a different angle. Yeah.
Okay. Do you
But
remember
I don't
seeing?
remember much about it.
Do you remember seeing any like body cameras from police officers or security footage or anything of that nature?
I'm sorry, that's what I'm not sure of what the other angle was. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. But so this longer video that you watched, you watched that more than 6 times, or was that just once?
No, just once. Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm going to ask you, you wrote kind of a long, you tried to remember everything that you had heard about this case, and you had a lot more than just this incident, right? About the people involved and all of that. So are you a fairly regular consumer of the news?
Yeah.
By television, newspaper?
So NPR, and we get the newspaper and we watch the news pretty regularly, yeah.
Okay. So you wrote a little bit about the charges initially, or what you recalled to be the charges, right? And then you recall reading some article that Mr. Floyd and Mr. Chauvin had worked together in some location, right? And you also heard that Mr. Floyd didn't want to get into the squad car because he was claustrophobic.
Right.
Right. You also recall hearing something about conflicting autopsy reports as to whether Floyd had drugs in his system.
Well, I don't know if it was about that or if it was just kind of different conclusions, and I don't remember exactly what those were. But.
Okay. And then you recall reading some information about Mr. Chauvin's personal, like, divorce and
Right.
some other things he has going on, right?
Yes.
So you have, and you're probably one of the few people that kind of went beyond just this incident last year in May, right? And I just kind of wanted to ask you some questions about that. Do you understand that in this trial, evidence will be presented in this courtroom, right?
Yes.
And some of the things that you reference in here, obviously you've heard about them, you've read about these things, that may not be evidence in this case.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Can you set those things that you've heard in the news aside and judge the case on the evidence in the courtroom?
Yeah, because you always have to kind of take it with a grain of salt.
Right. What do you mean? What do you mean take it with a grain of salt? What do you have to take?
Well, I mean, when there's ongoing investigations and information coming forth, as information comes out, later it may not be accurate. And
okay. The question asked you, from what you have seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant? To which your response, or what you chose, was very negative. And when asked, why do you feel that way, you wrote, seeing the look on Chauvin's face in the video and seeing the other officers and him ignoring pleas of bystanders to stop once he was on the ground and subdued.
Yeah, that was difficult.
Okay. Why was that difficult?
When you see somebody who is already subdued, it seemed very unnecessary and over the top to me.
You mentioned kind of earlier in terms of dispute resolution is the importance of hearing both sides, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree that there's probably more information that will come out in this courtroom that you've not learned?
Oh, of course.
And some of that information will be relevant to perhaps police training or other aspects of law enforcement that may change. Would you be willing to allow that information to change your initial perception?
Yeah. I mean, if that potentially, sure.
Okay. Well, you understand, again, Mr. Chauvin is presumed innocent of these charges.
Yep.
And you formed and it's you're not the first person to come in here and have a negative opinion of the case, right? So again, it's perfectly acceptable. They're your views and you're entitled to hold your views. The question is, can you set aside your views and judge this case on the evidence and the law as it's presented in court?
Yes, I think I can.
Right? So you think you can or you can. There's a difference.
Yes, I can.
Okay. You had the question was asked of you of your impression of Mr. Floyd. You checked it was neutral, and you said, I don't know much about him besides what I saw in the video. I understand he has a record and he may have tried to buy something at Cup Foods with possibly a fake bill, but he shouldn't have been treated that way for that, right?
Yeah.
So again, can you at least acknowledge that you formed your impression about Mr. Floyd is certainly in response to how you viewed he was treated by the Minneapolis police officers?
Based on what I saw in the video and such, yeah.
Okay. You were asked if you've talked about Mr. Floyd's death with your family, friends, or coworkers, or discussed it online, for example, on social media, and you checked yes. And it was asked, if yes, what opinions have you expressed? You wrote, Floyd had a record but didn't deserve to die from this by a cop who is supposed to serve and protect, who ignored his pleas that he couldn't breathe. Chauvin should have stopped. The other officers should have intervened, as I think one tried. And maybe it goes on. That was the end.
As I think, what was the last part?
I think one tried.
Oh, right.
Okay. So I guess again, you have formed a very strong opinion. Agreed?
Yeah.
Right? You've expressed it kind of in three different ways in response to three different questions. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
is that a
sorry.
yes? That's okay. And are you convinced that you can set aside your very strong opinions, presume Mr. Chauvin innocent, and analyze this case on the facts and evidence as presented in court?
Yes, because I think you have to approach it with a blank slate and start all over.
So you were asked a question about the protests that occurred after the death of Mr. Floyd. You wrote that the protests solidified people around the need for change in our police and our society's systemic racism. The vandalism by Boogaloo Boys and others was very distressing.
Yes.
Okay. And you underlined the word need in your sentence. solidified people around the need for change in our police.
Yes.
So you have an opinion about Mr. Chauvin, right? Again, nothing wrong with that. Right? And you also have a pretty strong opinion that there needs to be change or police reform.
Yes, I mean, I think that's even been noted by the head of the police.
Okay?
Mr. Nelson, I think we're going to take our afternoon break.
Okay.
So, sir, I'm going to ask you to go back to the courtroom. Deputy will direct you. We'll be on break until 3:30. Thank you.